We quite often see the body through a physical lens, the biochemistry in particular. So we look at taking things out and putting things in to try and control the biological systems. We look at adding chemicals and things like that in terms of supplements and medication, which isn't wrong, it's just not the whole picture, because actually underlying all of that is like an orchestrating thing, which is the energy of the body, like literally the bioelectricity. And so what we want to do with biomagnetism is balance that bioelectricity in the body.
This is the Born to be Brilliant podcast, helping you harness the habits and unlock the tools to bring you more meaning, vibrance, and the personal power to help you shine like the diamond you are. Hey everyone, I'm joined today by Faye Coulson. I'm really excited to have this conversation with Faye because she is a biomagnetist, and this is just going to be really interesting, bringing something that's not new, but not mainstream. And I'm really excited to listen to this. So, Faye, a massive welcome to the Born to be Brilliant podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. So tell us and our listeners, I'm sure everyone's intrigued, like, what is a biomagnetist?
So I'll kind of give you a very nutshell introduction and then tell you exactly kind of how I found it. So essentially, what I do is work with people with chronic and complex illness, and we really want to look to get to the root of what's going on in their system. And the way that we do that is by putting magnets on their body to really balance at the most fundamental level. I found it in my late 20s, and all throughout my 20s, I had chronic kidney infections. I tried everything, all the normal stuff, all the conventional, going to all the doctors and consultants, having the antibiotics, all the weird and wonderful stuff as well, and just nothing worked. And actually, in the year before I found biomagnetism, I had 14 kidney infections, which is 14 rounds of antibiotics. And you can imagine then the knock-on of all of that into the rest of my health. I ended up with IBS, acne, migraines. It just felt like everything I did I just spiraled more and more out of control. And then I went for coffee with somebody who said, "You look awful. You should try this thing with magnets." And I was like, sounds weird, but yeah, I'll do it. I'll try anything. And touch wood, within 2 weeks, my kidney infections had cleared up. And then it took kind of about another 4 to 6 weeks for all the other symptoms to clear. And so, I mean, obviously it was kind of life-changing for me on the health side of things. But I also knew that more people should have access to this. It shouldn't be that people get so desperate before finding a solution. So I went and did all of my training in Miami. And then, something I'm sure we'll get into a little bit more, I realized that there's only so many people that I'm going to be able to stick magnets on in my lifetime. And I genuinely believe that everyone should have access to things like this. And so I founded the training school, School of Biomagnetism as well.
Amazing. Oh, wow. I love that. I can literally see that whole journey unfolding. And I have a very similar story in another business that I started many years ago when my babies were babies. And in the same sense of I had a need, I found a solution. I then thought, why don't more people know about this and have this? I set about changing the world, and then realized there's no way I can do this all on my own, and created an academy to very similarly. So I can really relate to that story and journey. I mean, I want to talk more about that in a moment as well. But before we do, just sticking with magnets for a second, I have heard bits and things around this, and I've weighted blankets and magnets with sleep and so on. I don't know huge amounts about it, but I'm sure it's deep depths and study and everything, but just for the layman listening, that's like, how do magnets make us better? Is there a headline thing you can share that just explains that a bit?
Yeah, so I think actually even bringing it back to my own story is a really good example of, we quite often see the body through a physical lens, the biochemistry in particular. So we look at taking things out and putting things in to try and control the biological systems. We look at adding chemicals and things like that in terms of supplements and medication, which isn't wrong. It's just not the whole picture, because actually underlying all of that is like an orchestrating thing, which is the energy of the body, And I don't mean energy in a woo-woo way, like literally the bioelectricity in the body.
Yeah.
And so what we want to do with biomagnetism is balance that bioelectricity in the body, because magnets and electricity are inextricably linked. So if we can balance that foundational energy in the body, then actually the biochemistry can come back into balance, and then the biology can come back into balance. So we're really zooming in on like a super deep layer and balancing the body at that kind of most fundamental level.
That is so cool. And what kinds of things have you seen it like, other than your own transformation, your own, recovery? Because from the deep problem level through to all those extra symptoms and knock-on effects that you were experiencing with, skin and IBS, and I mean, those can be big problems for people in and of themselves. What other kinds of things have you witnessed people overcome?
So I tend to see all the complex, chronic, mysterious stuff, because a
Yeah.
bit like me, people don't get ill and think, oh, I'll do something with
Yeah.
magnets. Generally, by the time they find me, they've tried everything. And so I tend to see, yeah, the really tricky, complex, chronic stuff. I see a lot of perimenopausal women, for example, where actually they've been able to kind of coast those imbalances, but then the estrogen goes and suddenly it's like there's that sticking plaster goes away. I see lots of things like long COVID, Lyme disease. They're big drivers for people coming to see me, but really like a wide range of things. So Amy, who originally suggested that I try this weird thing with magnets, she had been struggling with infertility for like years and years and years and years and years. And again, within like a handful of sessions, fell pregnant naturally. So that's kind of one case study. I've had one of my favourite stories to tell is a man who came to see me that categorically didn't want to come and see me, but his wife made him. He was very grumpy about the fact that he'd been made to come and see me, but he was losing his eyesight. And when they got into bed that night, he ripped the book out of his wife's hands. And she was like gunning for a fight at this point because he'd been really grumpy about it all day. But he had ripped it from her hands because he could read the book. He wasn't reading a book in bed because his eyesight had deteriorated too much. But he realised that he could see her book. And I love that as a story because it just shows that you don't have to believe it. It's not just placebo. It really does kind of fundamentally shift things. So yeah, lots of kind of chronic, complex, mysterious stuff, but also, for example, lots of nervous system stuff. I know nervous system is a real like buzzword at the moment, but if we think of, well, what's like the currency of the nervous system is bioelectricity and bioelectrical impulses. And
Yeah.
so actually, if we can put magnets on certain points in the body, it's a really great way to really quickly get to those fundamental kind of messaging blocks and things in the nervous system. So that's one of my kind of favorite ways to start with people, is get that nervous system balance in right from the start. So I liken it to like the trunk of the tree. We could spend ages working on the digestive system, the immune system, and all of those things. They're like branches coming off the middle. What we need to do first is get that trunk really nice and strong, because everything else hinges on it, and it does respond really beautifully to biomagnetism.
That's incredible. That excites me because that's kind of where my work sits, is in that trunk of that tree. And
Yeah.
even in some of the work I do with people around their behaviors and human behavior, it's different how you approach it with a regulated nervous system as compared to with a dysregulated nervous system. And so for anyone that's going, well, what does that even mean? We're talking now at, at a core level of things you can't even really control, or you're not even aware of, that can be dictating our actions. And whether that's through conditioning, experience, beliefs, anything, it's like it's invisible. It's not the logical, it's not the thing you go, oh yeah, that will be because of that thing. It's quite often people aren't that self in tune to know those things. So to know that magnets can work with that is really interesting. Like how do you know what to do with the magnets?
Good question. So we can kind of work with this two ways round. One is we go, there's this thing going on, let's try sticking some magnets here. So for example, a lot of people end up coming to see me for full treatments because they have menstrual cramps, and I say, pop these magnets on, see how you feel. And they go, well, if that can help this, then let's see what else we can do. So we can kind of go, there's a symptom, let's stick a magnet on it and see what happens. But actually, kind of like the full treatment and how we really get to the core of what's going on is by using muscle testing. So people might be familiar with kinesiology when they look for like the weakness in the arm. That's like how traditional kinesiology is done. How we do it in biomagnetism is we actually compare the length of the legs. So how a session looks is somebody lays down and I wiggle their feet around. But what I'm looking for is a muscular contraction. It actually happens down the whole right side of the body, and it's like an autonomic reflex, like if you go to the doctor and they check your reflexes in your knee and that kind of stuff. When you put a magnet on a point that's out of balance, the body goes, oh yeah, that one needs a magnet on it. And we see that in that muscular contraction in the legs. So if I compare the length of the legs, I can see that change in the leg length. And sometimes it's like pretty significant, like 2-3 inches. So I love it if somebody comes with someone else and I can show them, because it turns from this like abstract weird thing where I'm wiggling someone's legs to, oh my God, look at that. So it's amazing to see it. And so that tells us where the magnets are. So with biomagnetism, we always have a black magnet and a red magnet on the body. So when I get that muscular contraction, it tells me where the black magnet needs to go. We then need to work out where the red magnet needs to go to bring that back into balance again. And so once the red magnet's in the right place, those legs will come back into balance again. And that's how I know that we've kind of got both halves of that imbalance. And that's how we bring it back into balance again.
That's mind-blowing. So that's like, I've seen chiropractors do stuff around that, but to know that you can do, and I'm always amazed even with that. I know that even with gentle chiropractic work and manipulation, the smallest things that I think, how does that do anything? It's barely, you have more aggressive massages sometimes. And I think, how does that do anything? But it does. And I've watched, even my own misalignments and members of my family, and I've gone, wow, you were wonky and now you're straightened out again, from the tiniest, gentlest tweaks. But to think that magnets can do that. So what are they doing? Like, what are they doing in the body? What are the magnets pulling and releasing? Because I'm thinking now about IBS or gut related problems, which I think are really common and often come as a symptom of something nervous system level. Like, I think that's hugely common. But I'm picturing how I'm like, I bet magnets can help with that, but how do they do it?
Yeah. So there's kind of a few different like levels and explanations. One of the main things that we look at is pH balance in the body.
Okay.
So without getting too geeky, pH is just potential for hydrogen, and hydrogen is the distribution of hydrogen ions. And so it carries a charge because there's positive and negative ions. There's positive and negative areas with acidic and alkaline areas. If we can put the magnets on to balance those, that's one way in which we work. So again, you can kind of look at that like biological, chemical, physical layer. Somebody might have a biological symptom that's underpinned by an imbalance in the chemistry, in the pH, while the pH is underpinned by a differential in charge. So we're just kind of like going down the layers to that really fundamental base. But the other really important thing is all of our cells in the body kind of operate like tiny little batteries. So the differential across the cell membrane is 70 millivolts, and that's all kind of guarded and protected by ion channels in the cell membrane, and that's all governed by charge. Well, that charge is super, super, super important. If that differential isn't maintained, the cell dies. In order for that cell to function optimally, it has to stay in that really kind of like precise bioelectrical balance that governs everything that cell does. What goes in, what goes out, how it functions, everything is governed by that charge. So if there's imbalances in the charges in the cell, if they're not able to maintain that charge, if the ions can't move in the way that they need to move, if those charged particles can't move, then the cells just can't function optimally. And so really, if you kind of multiply up each of those tiny little batteries by the trillions of cells that we have, we are bioelectrical beings. Bioelectricity and biomagnetism are inextricably linked, because actually one of the best ways that we can access that electricity in the body is with magnetism. And so if we can use magnets to balance the bioelectricity, then that balances biochemistry, which balances the biology. And that's the level that we want to see the changes, is in those biological processes in the body. So those symptoms resolve, but we're kind of not aiming to work at that level. We're aiming to work at that most fundamental level. And actually, like you say, like I was targeting my kidney infections, but actually there was all the IBS, the migraines, the acne, like it cascaded into everything else. And it's easy to look and go, well, there's this and there's this and there's this, and see them as individual symptoms.
Yeah.
Actually underlying all of it was that kind of fundamental orchestration of the bioelectricity.
Yeah.
So rather than treating each one separately, what biomagnetism does is go, let's actually just go back to the root of all of it. If we can balance this, then can they just kind of spontaneously resolve themselves?
This is fascinating. I have so many things coming up in my mind I want to ask you. One quick fire question is, and then I've got a couple of deeper ones, but the quick fire question I wanted to ask you is, when you work with magnets, do you have to work around different strengths? So you like, this thing needs this strength and this thing needs, or is it quite simply push pull? Like,
no. So
how complex is it?
A magnet needs to be at least 1,000 Gauss to be like a biomagnetism standard magnet. And then we have a negative side of the magnet and a positive side of the magnet. But really, stronger isn't better. Some people quite like strong magnets. I've caught my fingers between enough strong magnets in my life to not enjoy using them. But actually, the outcomes aren't any better as you get stronger.
Right.
Between about 1,000 Gauss and 3,000 Gauss is what we need. That's just the measurement of strength. So like they're stronger than a fridge magnet, but not so strong that you'd trap your finger in and hurt yourself.
Okay, interesting. That was just purely my own geeky question. So, okay, this could go deep, but one thing that's in my mind is, we've talked about people with chronic illnesses, and like you said, it's quite common for people to try all the other things first, and then they're looking for something alternative when they find you. And I get that, like, people do want to try and find the solutions they're familiar with, and it's a shame, and I know that you're working really hard to bring this so much more into the forefront, that people don't leave it to the last resort. But if people are coming to fix a problem, that's one thing, but can you also use this to optimize? Because I'm a little optimizer, and I'll go, I don't need anything, but I want the thing because I want to unlock the very best of my health, the very best of my capacity, so I'm always looking at how to optimize, not just fix when it's gone wrong. Can you use biomagnetism for human optimization?
Yes. I mean, everyone always says, don't they, like prevention is better than cure. And actually, kind of some of my favorite ways to work is people book in for biomagnetism like they'd book their car in for an MOT. And come in, say, every 6 months, every year, just to kind of keep everything balanced rather than waiting for things to start to go wrong and then get them back into balance. I love magnets for optimization. And now, like, I love just being able to do that myself after having felt that like desperation of putting things right. Now I love kind of, like you say, what can I do to layer in to really like optimize and unlock my kind of full potential and energy and things. And so I love using biomagnetism like that, like personally now as well.
Yeah, I would. I would be like obsessed, because I think I'm quite well, not quite, I'm very self-aware and constantly self-checking, and so I'll know when something's out of whack, and I don't have to get ill to know that. I'm like, something's slightly off kilter here, and sometimes you can put your finger on it, sometimes you can't. But I know I've had times where I've gone, whether it's a hormonal thing or just a shift somewhere, and it's like, just want to bring this into alignment, and you start to feel it coming out in your body in different ways, or your energy in different ways. I imagine it can really help avoid like problems from stress and stress management as well, if you're aware and you're like, okay, I know this is going on and I need to settle the system. So I love the idea of prevention rather than cure, and just like optimize and staying at your best. So that's exciting.
And I love that, like that intuition like you were talking about. Actually, all that we're generally doing with biomagnetism is probably tapping into what the body already knows. And so it's one of the reasons that it's quite easy to teach and learn, because we don't need to kind of master all of the anatomy and physiology and how everything interacts in the same way that, say, studying nutrition would have to. And actually, something that I've kind of developed in the last year or so is how to tap into that intuition, because so often people come in for a treatment and we'll put a magnet somewhere really random. Like they won't have kind of mentioned, like, let's say they come in to see me for IBS. Actually, we put a magnet on their ear and they'll go, "That's so weird. In the car, I thought, I bet Faye puts a magnet on my ear today." Because actually, like, so often we know what's going on. We just don't always take the time to listen to it. And
Mm.
it's that classic thing, isn't it? Like it'll like you kind of get that gentle knock and then we don't listen and then it like rams down the door because we haven't listened to all the subtle signs. So I love that, like you're saying, like really kind of feeling into that and going, "Oh, yeah, there's something going on there." So actually, I've done just a short discovery course for biomagnetism for people to start to experience it. And obviously, we can't teach the muscle testing in that. So what I have done is done like a guided meditation for people to scan through their body and work out, okay, actually, where does it feel like things might be a bit blocked or a bit stuck or a bit dysregulated or imbalanced in some way, and
Mm.
then work with that to kind of put the magnets on in a much more like intuitive way rather than the formulaic way than we do in practice.
I love that. I love anything where we combine, scientific fact of like this is what's happening in your system, and along with that intuition and that inner knowing, which actually leads me nicely onto the sort of next part of this that I'm curious about. And that is, we mentioned before about our bodies being we're quite highly charged, right? We are electrical. We have magnetism going on. I think this is why we get pulled by even astrological aspects, and that's probably a whole nother conversation. But there's something about the heart and magnetism, isn't there? And I'm really curious on two levels about the heart. One being genuinely love, the actual thing about loving, self-love, receiving love and loving, and also then cardiovascular wellness. Is there anything you can share around that and the magnetism? Because that's just an area of interest that I have, but I also believe and I'm curious about how, when these things are optimized, like a magnet, we can attract more of what we are. And I think so often we get blocked and stuck because we are out of alignment with that. But yeah, just what can you share on that?
Yeah, so one thing that like I always springs to mind when people talk about kind of bioelectricity of the body is if you go into A&E and that kind of stuff, one of the first things generally they do is take an ECG to measure the electrical activity of the heart. And so we kind of don't think of ourselves as bioelectrical beings, but it's like generally first port of call with
Mm.
medical things is to check in on the bioelectricity of the body. And there's lots of research by the Heart Math Institute all about actually optimizing the energy of the heart and all of the kind of the implications of that and all the amazing things that it can do. I'm in the process of writing a book at the moment, and there's a chapter in that I haven't got to yet, but where I'm going to like actually really deep dive into all of that research and tie that research into the kind of all of those fields of the heart, and actually how does that tie in with biomagnetism. So come back to me in about 6 months and I'll have like a whole conversation around that, but it's not a bit that I've got to in my research yet. But definitely that whole, when we bring our body back into alignment, our health back into alignment, everything kind of slots back
Yeah.
into alignment with that. So like you were saying about kind of really like optimizing that and really getting into that kind of flow state.
Yeah.
That happens on a bioelectrical level as well. When everything's flowing, there's no blocks, that ripples.
Mhm.
And I always kind of say that we probably only really understand the tip of the iceberg of what we do with biomagnetism. And I was having a really interesting conversation with a client who, like you, is very in tune with their body, very intuitive as to what's going on. And an imbalance came up in her hips. Now, the hips in biomagnetism is actually generally linked to respiratory symptoms, can be linked to inflammation, particularly inflammation in the lower abdomen, and can also be linked to the hip, the actual hips, the hip joints. And my clinic is actually in a yoga studio. We always joke there that if there's been a hip opening class, because at least one person comes out crying because they've released loads of emotions because they're stored in the hips. So this lady's hips came up and I was like, well, it could be this and it could be this. And she was like, it's so funny that you say that because like tick, 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 she's running, her hips hurt. She's got this cough that won't quite shift. She feels really inflamed in her lower abdomen. And she knows that she's kind of holding on to a lot of emotional energy, and she's kind of a body worker. And said, it's funny because literally this morning I thought, when I get home I need to do some hip opening stuff because I know that there's some stuck energy there. So from biomagnetism perspective, we say, well, we place magnets on the hip for respiratory and inflammation stuff, but really it works at so many other layers, and they're just the ones that we're aware of. I'm sure that actually it works in ways that we just can't even fathom, and things like being in alignment and actually allowing ourselves to get into a space of like receiving a manifestation and all of that stuff. I'm sure it all ties together.
I'm sure. Yeah, I think so too. Definitely. So you mentioned about being in flow and alignment there. And this is something I see with clients all the time in business, and, being there and having that and then not. And it can be because they change or their purpose changes. And it's like, oh, actually, this isn't what I want anymore. Or it can be that I see this quite often, reaching a milestone and just going, oh, it doesn't feel, this isn't what I wanted. This isn't what I thought it would look like at this level. You hear stories all the time of people going, oh, just, you just start again. And I've got a lot of reasons why, a lot of suspicions as to why people go there. But when we're out of alignment, success doesn't feel good. And it doesn't really matter what you achieve if it doesn't line up. I love talking about how this relates to the body. So you're working, predominantly with the human body, and my work is with the human behind the business as well. Do you see this with your clients, or do you have you got experience of this where you've gone, yeah, it doesn't align, it doesn't fit, and then from a business perspective, just the what we go through to realign? Because I was comparing this literally just the other week to chiropractic musculoskeletal alignment and emotional alignment and success, and how we can feel completely off sometimes. I just really love to get your take on that with your knowledge and just your own journey.
Yeah, it probably doesn't surprise you that lots of people who come to me are at some stage of burnout in their life. And actually, before the pandemic, I was on such a mission to raise the profile of biomagnetism and for more people to have access to biomagnetism that I got very close to burning out myself. And I think if the pandemic hadn't hit, I would have had to take that time out. Just it would have had to be self-enforced, not externally enforced. And from the outside, I was doing really well, and I was doing really well. And I love what I do. And so in the moment when the person was in front of me, it didn't feel like hard work. But I was working 6 days a week. I had clinics in Harley Street, Hitchin and Hull, not particularly close together. So I was living in Hertfordshire, so that my close clinic was Hitchin. So I was there twice a week. I was in Harley Street twice a week. And then I used to go up to Hull and run a clinic up there twice a week. There was no practitioners in the north, and I had some clients there and their friends and their family, and they all wanted biomagnetism. And so I did 2 days in each location, and then 1 day traveling back from Hull. So I was working hard, but I was meeting great success, and I had a waiting list, and lots of top clinics in London were referring clients to me. I had people, well, I still do have people flying in from Europe and traveling across the country to see me because there is not many biomagnetists around. So in some ways, I was doing incredibly well. I was living the dream. I was doing everything that I wanted to do. All these people had access to biomagnetism. But I think in a way that women do a lot and people in wellness do a lot, I was sacrificing myself in order to do all of that. And actually, what I was going to do is open a clinic in central London. So I signed all of the agreements in around February 2020, ready to open in around April 2020. And obviously, life had other plans. But actually, in hindsight, I'm so grateful for that, because it spun me in a totally different trajectory. And rather than me trying to see more and more and more and more and more people, I realized actually the way that I can really amplify my impact and for more people to have access to biomagnetism, not just close to home, but like internationally, is to teach other practitioners. And so that's why I founded the School of Biomagnetism. So now even more people have access to biomagnetism, but I'm not burning myself out in the process, and I'm able to support and empower other people on their journeys. So I definitely, I think it's really easy, isn't it, to become very like fixated, and actually you lose all perspective on things. And sometimes taking that step away, seeing things through a different lens, just unlocks so much. And so I know the pandemic and lockdown was really hard for lots of people. For me, it was an absolute godsend, because even though I didn't earn any money because I was doing face-to-face work, it gave me the space to reconsider everything. And actually the trajectory that I'm on now, it does feel in alignment. It feels just like I'm in that flow. And now I get to watch people. I still practice biomagnetism, but 2 days a week. The rest of the time I'm teaching. And now I get to watch other people go through all of the joy that I did of someone coming in, and you help them, and it's an amazing process. So not only do more people have access to biomagnetism, but also more people have access to that amazing, fulfilling career of being able to support people with biomagnetism.
I love that story. And I think it's so true, because sometimes it's knowing what really lights you up and what you feel to some extent is your purpose. And, you do still keep your hand in, and there's clearly a passion there, but quite rightly, you knew that you couldn't grow to the extent and make the impact that you wanted to make single-handedly. And it's very similar to me and with my other business. I get that. And for some people, though, that is enough. Like, they just want to have a little bit close to home. It fits the life they want to create. And that's what I'm all about. It's like, what is the life you want to create? Because you don't have to grow an empire. You can actually have a business that is effectively your dream job, and you get to do your job, and you do that to the amount that fulfills you, that brings you the revenue you're looking for, and supports the life you want to create. And for some, especially, parents, that they want to be around for their kids and so on, is perfect. And that's great. I think when you have big visions, like you and I clearly did with these practices, it was a case of, well, that's fine, but I want to make a bigger impact. I can see, and I know what it feels like to go, I can't stop there. There are too many people that need this. And you want to get that message out so desperately. That becomes your purpose. So whilst you are passionate about the end user and the results, you become almost more passionate about facilitating that, increasing the awareness around the world, empowering practitioners who can then go and make that impact, because that's your that really lights you up. And some people are made for that, you're like that kind of way shower in that way. So I think it's important to lean into that, and you were given a nudge from the universe to tweak your trajectory, and that's amazing. But I do think it's important, because I think I see some people trying to do that, but actually that doesn't fit with the life they actually want. They would be better off being that practitioner that makes the impact locally and hands-on. And likewise, seeing people create things like we have, and then go, wait, it's taken over my life. Hang on a minute. This was meant to give me freedom. So yeah, there's always something to come and give us that tap on the shoulder and help us out. So thank you for sharing that. I love that. So before we wrap up, is there any closing message or key takeaway that you are passionate about leaving? Because I know that that's a big part of your mission this year as well, is like giving people that know-how. What's the most important message you want people to take away from today?
So I would love people to actually just try getting some magnets on their body. They're 20 quid, and there's a free ebook. It tells you how to use them. So there's kind of very little barrier to entry. And worst case scenario, you've got a lovely fridge magnet and your 20 quid pourer. But best case scenario is actually it does unlock something for you. So that's like definitely, I believe every house should have magnets and every town should have a biomagnetist. So that's kind of my mission. But I guess as well as just, I've been reflecting a lot on my own journey whilst writing the book. And I think kind of an invitation to step back and see things through a different lens has been kind of coming up on my mind whilst we've been talking. Actually, going through that pandemic and having the break to just step back and look at things differently. For me, having been through everything to try and solve my health things, and actually it was taking a different tact and looking at things differently, that actually sometimes get away, break your routine, stop sitting at the desk, get outside. How can you shift your perspective on life? Because I think we can get quite stuck into things, and it doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means we don't always see the whole picture. For me, that picture is looking at things through a bioelectrical lens, but that could be different for everyone. So I guess just, can you look at your problem through a new lens, whatever that problem might be and whatever that lens might be? Give yourself the space and the grace to be able to do that and explore that.
I love that. Great message. Well, great message. And what a great conversation. I'm so intrigued and I want to play with some magnets for sure. Obviously, of course I do. But I really hope people do take something from this and have a play, guys. See what you can find for yourself. We're all about optimizing the human behind the mission. And I'm just so grateful for you coming on and talking about this today, Faye. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me.
I hope you enjoyed this episode, and remember, go out there and shine your light bright because you were born to be brilliant.